I'm Victoria Emerson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Matt de Frece, Head of Sales at Power Control. Welcome, Matt, to this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Power Control are going to be exhibiting at Healthcare Estates on stand E7, and you'll be giving the presentation with the title Proactive UPS and IPS Maintenance, Ensuring Compliance and Reliability. And that takes place on the 21st of October in the Performance and Compliance Exhibition Theatre, which is open to everyone to attend. So we're going to be talking a bit about that presentation now. So can you start off by telling us what the HTM 0601 is and why it's important for estate managers to refer to this document?
Yeah, definitely. So the HTM 0601, it's known as the Health Technical Memorandum, and it's a document that's published by the Department of Health to give guidance on how healthcare facilities can install, design, operate and maintain their electrical systems. So it's a really important document because when you think about the healthcare environment, it is so reliant on resilient power. Bit of a tongue twister there. But when you think about the things in a hospital, you've got things like life support machines in operating theatres, you've got medical imaging equipment and lighting. So if the power fails within those environments, it's a real risk to patient safety. They're directly at risk from that. So the HTM 0601, it's guidance notes on how to build a resilient electrical infrastructure within healthcare facilities to really limit the disruption. So within that document, it talks about three main forms of energy that go into a healthcare facility. It talks about the primary electrical supply, which will be delivered from a grid. It talks about a secondary power supply, which would be delivered by something like a standby generator or a CHP. And then the bit that we really focus on is the tertiary power supplies. The HTM refer to it as a tertiary power supply, but usually that is a UPS system. And what that job is to supplement the primary power supply and secondary power supply to make sure that there's never any gaps in electricity to those facilities. So it really provides the technical detail on how to install these systems and maintain them. So it's important for facilities engineers because it helps them to stay compliant and within the health and safety laws. It helps them to make sure that there aren't any vulnerabilities in that power supply, and also to make sure that they're maintained properly to really limit disruptions within those environments.
Yeah, absolutely critical. You know, literally a case of life or death to keep the lights on, keep the machines working. So what sections of HTM 0601 relate specifically to UPS systems?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's three main ones that really refer to it. So the first one's section 11 of HTM 0601, and that really discusses the installation side of a UPS system. So what happens when you design a new system to go into one of these facilities. But some of those points really do also apply to the ongoing maintenance as well, existing installations. I've pre-prepared an example of this because I can't memorize the whole document by heart, but there's one section that's quite interesting, 11.6, because that really shows how much of an impact the environmental conditions have on the design life of a battery used within a UPS. Because UPS batteries like to be between 20 and 25 degrees centigrade. That's how you get the optimum design life from a battery. But the HTM document, it really shows how much of a negative effect high temperatures have on the design life of batteries, because it says that if the average ambient temperature is 30 degrees, that design life is halved. And if the average temperature is 40 degrees, you'd only expect to get 25% of its design life. So normally the batteries that would go into these environments have a design life of 10 years. But if they're in the wrong environment, it makes it clear that you could end up only getting 2.5 years from that battery. So it's got some really good practical advice on how to limit disruptions or unplanned disruptions. Because as a worst case scenario, obviously that's an unplanned disruption, but as a worst case scenario, a battery that's not looked after in a hot environment for prolonged periods, it can actually be a fire risk. So it really shows that it's important to bear these things in mind. So the HTM, it also sort of points out that in order to mitigate this risk, the batteries within a UPS system, you'd look to change them at 80% of their design life, because you're sort of mitigating that risk. And this is something that I think is quite important at the moment, because everyone would acknowledge that trusts are under so much pressure budget wise. So it's natural to try and sweat assets and make things last as long as they can. But obviously, when you're looking at these guidance notes, they are quite clear on the maintenance plan and how to look after this type of equipment. So that was section 11. There are two other sections. Section 16, that talks about when a UPS system's first installed in a medical location, what tests should be completed as part of that going in. And then section 17 is important to this conversation, because that discusses the maintenance and operational management for UPS systems. So again, not memorizing these off the top of my head, I've got them written down, but 17.98, that mentions that there should be a visual inspection on a UPS system each month. That should be done monthly. So that would be something that would be done by the estates team. But then a section further on, 17.102, that says that every 6 months it should have a proper full inspection, which would include functional tests on the UPS system. So that would be done by a qualified UPS engineer, so a specialist would be called in for those works. So those are just a few things within the HTM that really show it just provides guidance on how UPS systems should be installed and how they should be looked after they've gone in.
Yeah, fantastic amount of detail, which has got to be incredibly helpful if everybody follows it, of course.
Exactly.
So do you find that some healthcare organisations maybe misinterpret or overlook certain points in the HTM when it comes to UPS maintenance particularly?
Yeah, I think the biggest one we seem to get is that the HTM document, it's not law, it is guidance notes. But it's quite a tricky one to answer, really, because this document is published by the Department of Health as an approved code of practice that's to be adopted by healthcare facilities. So quite a lot of education, and there's a lot of information around that really shows how it is so critical to follow the guidance notes, that approved code of practice, basically, because if you don't follow that, it does start to bring into things that are law, like the Health and Safety at Work Act and the Electricity at Work regulations, which are law. And if you're not following the guidance notes that are written for those environments, in effect, you're not complying with those sides of the law. So it is important for trusts to understand the importance of following the guidance notes and where they stand in relation to other standards and other things that are law, because they have been written to ensure a resilience of the power in these locations. And as we said, things like an operating theatre, if you have an unplanned power outage in that environment, the consequences can be really, really dire. So it is important to follow those and make sure that everything's being done to ensure patient safety.
So we're talking about prevention is better than cure, as well as sort of regular maintenance, and regular maintenance obviously is going to prevent any unforeseen hiccups. So in terms of UPS maintenance and implementing this prevention over cure sort of mantra. What are some early warning signs that estate managers should be looking for before systems reach the point of failure? You know, they're doing their monthly inspections, they're doing their 6 monthly kind of deep dive inspections. What are the early warning signs that they could be looking for while they're doing those inspections?
Yeah, so when it comes to the actual estates department and what they're asked to do, it's basically looking at the alarms on a UPS system because they're quite sophisticated devices, and a UPS is always operating, whether it's got the power there or not, it's always doing something because it conditions the power. So if there's ever any internal faults with that UPS system, it will flag up there's a problem with it. So it's important to make sure that those alarms are regularly looked to make sure there aren't any alarms on the UPS system, especially if they're not tied in with some sort of SCADA system where it will flag up on some central desk. And then the other main point for them to look at really is the environment. As we mentioned earlier on, hot temperatures have a massive negative effect on UPS systems and especially the batteries. So again, the HTMs just ask for, during those monthly checks, to check the environment and make sure it's as designed basically. And some of the locations that UPSs end up going in, these hospitals weren't designed 30, 40 years ago to have UPS systems in them. You know, medical imaging equipment's come on a lot, the standards have moved on, and now you need to have a UPS system in things that you didn't have to have years ago. So some of the locations UPSs end up, they can be less than ideal, and rely on small rooms with localized air conditioning. So just especially those rooms, just making sure that that cooling's okay and working, and that the temperature's okay for them. Those are mainly the things that the estates department can look at. In addition to that, section 17 sets out other things that can be done by a specialist. So it would be getting a specialist UPS engineer to do those 6 monthly checks, which would be more in depth.
So practical advice is what people really like to get from experts like you. What practical advice can you give to someone who's reviewing their tertiary power maintenance schedules to ensure they really meet the intent of HTM 0601? What kind of crucial, critical things can you advise people to do so they stay on track?
I don't think I've got anything earth-shattering with this advice, but
sometimes the obvious things are things that get overlooked, aren't they? So anything you can offer.
Yeah, I mean, we've acknowledged that the budgets are so tight at the moment, and so everyone's looking at where they can make savings. That's a big challenge. So it's natural to look at everything. But I think it's important with the HTMs, it stresses a lot about documenting the maintenance checks. And obviously, when it comes to these monthly checks, the HTMs make reference to a site logbook, which would document these maintenance checks. So I think keeping good records is a really important part of making sure that compliance is reached. It's quite a basic thing. But then I think secondly, when it comes to following the HTM 0601, it's been written for healthcare facilities engineers. And so anyone that really does work in that environment, I think it's good just not to rely on what other people say or what they've heard about the HTM 0601, or maybe not doing things how they've always done them. It's important to do their own research. That document's free to download. It's quite an easy document. There's not a massive amount to look at. So I think doing their own research, I think the latest revision was from 2017, but there were some revisions in 2021. So it's just keeping up to date with that and making sure that they're not relying on hearsay and doing the research themselves as well.
Well, there's nothing like getting folk together to talk about these sorts of things, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing at Healthcare Estates on the 21st and 22nd of October. So you'll be on stand E7, won't you, Matt? And I'm sure anyone who wants to come along and talk to you about this kind of thing, how they find working in their environment, you'll be very happy to speak to them.
Yep, really looking forward to it.
So thank you very much for your time today. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I always learn a lot on podcasts. So I've really enjoyed it. Just to remind everybody that the conference programme and the theatre programme, and registration for Healthcare Estates, they're all live on Healthcare Estates website, which is www.healthcare-estates.com. I look forward to seeing you, Matt, in October very soon in Manchester Central, and we'll see everybody else on the next podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks.